The blood-curdling scream that echoed through the dusty main street of Willits, California, in 1876, froze Caleb Kincaid's blood as effectively as a winter storm. He'd never moved so fast in all his 30 years, dropping the supplies he'd been loading onto his wagon and drawing his Colt revolver in one fluid motion born of years riding the unforgiving western frontier. The narrow alleyway between the general store and the saloon concealed a scene that would forever be etched into his memory. A woman cowered against the weathered clapboard wall, her face partially hidden by cascading auburn hair, while a man with liquor on his breath and malice in his eyes loomed over her. "Thought I told you to have dinner ready," the man snarled, raising his hand again. Caleb's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That'll be enough." The drunk turned, surprise quickly morphing into contempt as he sized up the interruption. "Mind your business, cowboy. This here's between me and my wife." "Not anymore," Caleb replied, his voice deadly quiet. The revolver remained steady in his hand, though he hadn't raised it. The threat was implicit. "You ain't got no right. I've got every right to stop a man beating a woman in plain daylight. Now step away." Perhaps it was the cold steel in Caleb's eyes harder than the Colt in his hand, or perhaps it was the gathering crowd at the alley's entrance that made the man reconsider. With a final venomous glare at the woman, he spat on the ground and shouldered past Caleb. "This ain't over, Emma," he growled. "I'll see you at home." Caleb watched him stagger away before holstering his weapon and approaching the woman cautiously, as one might a spooked mare. "Madam, are you hurt?" When she finally lifted her face, the sight knocked the wind from Caleb's lungs. Her right eye was swollen nearly shut, a dark bruise blossoming across her cheekbone. Her lip was split, a trickle of blood marring her otherwise delicate features. But it was her eyes, the unclouded one, a brilliant green, that struck him. There wasn't defeat there, as he'd expected, but smoldering defiance. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "Thank you, sir, but I should go." "Wait," Caleb said before he could stop himself. "Let me help you. The doctor's just down the street." "No doctor," she insisted, brushing ineffectually at her torn dress. "Robert, my husband, he doesn't like doctors asking questions." Caleb Kincaid had spent 15 years hardening himself against the cruelties of the frontier. He'd buried his parents after a Comanche raid when he was just 15, survived 3 cattle drives across hostile territory, and faced down more desperate men than he cared to remember. In all that time, through all those trials, not once had he shed a tear. He'd locked away that part of himself so thoroughly, he sometimes wondered if it still existed. Yet, as this woman Emma, the brute had called her, tried to straighten her clothing with dignity despite her injuries, something cracked inside Caleb's carefully constructed armor. He saw, beneath the fresh bruises, older yellowing marks that told a story of ongoing suffering. When she winced as she tried to adjust her shawl over her shoulder, revealing finger-shaped bruises on her upper arm, the unthinkable happened. Caleb Kincaid felt moisture gather in his eyes. "Mrs." He began, his voice uncharacteristically rough. "Armstrong," she supplied. "Emma Armstrong." A single tear tracked down his weathered cheek, shocking him as much as it clearly shocked her. He brushed it away quickly, embarrassed, but found his voice with new resolve. "Mrs. Armstrong, I can't let you go back to him." Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. He'll find me. He always does." "Not this time," Caleb said, the words emerging as a sacred vow. "I promise you'll be safe. I'll make sure of it." Emma stared at him, searching his face for deception or ulterior motives, finding only determined sincerity. "Why would you help a stranger?" Caleb didn't have an answer that made sense even to himself. All he knew was that something about this woman's quiet strength, despite her circumstances, had awakened something long dormant within him. "Because no one should live in fear," he finally answered. "And because I can." The next decision Emma Armstrong made would change both their lives irrevocably, setting them on a path neither could have anticipated on that dust-blown afternoon in Willits. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "Where would we go?" "My ranch," Caleb said. "It's a day's ride north." "Remote, defensible." He hesitated. "If you'd rather stay in town, I know people who—" "No," she interrupted. "A day's ride sounds just far enough." As they slipped through the back streets toward the livery where Caleb's wagon waited, neither spoke of what this escape might mean. Neither acknowledged the line. They were crossing a married woman fleeing with a stranger, a man interfering in another man's marriage. In 1876 California, such actions carried heavy consequences. Yet watching Emma flinch at every loud noise, seeing how she kept to the shadows out of habit, Caleb found his resolve only strengthening. Whatever came next, whatever price he might pay, he would keep his promise to protect her. The journey to Caleb's ranch was tense. Every hoofbeat sounded like pursuit to Emma's ears, and she kept looking over her shoulder despite Caleb's reassurances that they weren't being followed. The road wound through rolling golden hills dotted with gnarled oak trees, climbing gradually into pine-covered mountains. "Almost there," Caleb said as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. "Just over this next ridge." Emma hadn't spoken much during their journey. The physical pain of her injuries combined with the emotional turmoil of her sudden flight had left her withdrawn and watchful. Now she looked ahead with apprehension. "Will there be others at your ranch?" she asked. "Just my foreman Miguel and his wife Lucia. They have a cabin on the property." Caleb glanced at her. "They're good people. They won't ask questions you don't want to answer." The ranch came into view as they crested the ridge, a modest but well-maintained house of hewn timber nestled among pines, with several outbuildings and corrals spread across a small valley. A creek glinted in the late afternoon light, and cattle grazed on the hillsides. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed, the first hint of relaxation in her voice. "It's not much, but it's peaceful. Safe." Caleb guided the wagon down the slope. "Been building it up for 5 years now." A Mexican man emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on a rag. His curious expression shifted to concern when he saw Emma's bruised face. "Miguel," Caleb called, jumping down from the wagon. "This is Mrs. Armstrong. She'll be staying with us for a while." To his credit, Miguel asked no questions, merely nodded respectfully to Emma. "Welcome, Senora. Lucia will be happy for the company." "Thank you," Emma said softly. Caleb helped her down from the wagon, careful not to touch her injured arm. "Let's get you settled. You must be exhausted." Inside, the house was simply furnished but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with comfortable-looking chairs arranged before it. Bookshelves lined another wall, more books than Emma would have expected in a cowboy's home. "You like to read," she observed. Caleb looked almost embarrassed. "Winter nights get long." "Reading passes the time." He showed her to a small bedroom. "You can have my room, I'll sleep in the bunkhouse." "I couldn't possibly, I insist," he said firmly. "There's a lock on the door. Use it if it makes you feel safer." Emma looked around the room, touching the clean quilt on the bed with something like wonder. "When was the last time you brought a woman here?" The question clearly caught him off guard. "I haven't," he admitted. "Not ever." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, and perhaps something more. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. A small, dark-haired woman stood there, arms laden with cloth and a steaming bowl. "Lucia," Caleb said with evident relief. "This is Mrs. Armstrong." "Emma," she corrected him softly. "Please call me Emma." Lucia's warm smile put Emma at ease immediately. "I have brought clean clothes and hot water for washing, Emma, and salve for your—" She gestured to Emma's face. "Thank you," Emma said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I'll leave you ladies to it," Caleb said, backing toward the door. "I need to see to the horses." Once alone with Lucia, Emma allowed her carefully maintained composure to crack slightly. Her hands trembled as she accepted the bowl of warm water. "He is a good man," Lucia said quietly, helping Emma remove her torn shawl. "Caleb Kincaid has the reputation of being hard, but his heart is true." "I don't know why he's helping me," Emma confessed. "He doesn't know me." Lucia's smile was knowing. Sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind does not yet understand. She gently applied salve to Emma's bruised cheek. "Rest now. Tomorrow is a new day." That night, despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Emma. The unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the throbbing pain of her injuries, and the overwhelming reality of what she'd done kept her mind racing. She had left everything behind: the few possessions she could call her own, the small garden she had tended, her life in Willits. Robert would be furious when he realized she was truly gone. The thought made her heart race with fear. In their 5 years of marriage, she had never defied him so completely. There had been moments of rebellion, small acts of independence, but they had always resulted in painful consequences. Robert Armstrong had made it clear from the beginning that he expected complete obedience from his wife. Emma rose from the bed and moved to the window. Moonlight silvered the landscape, casting long shadows across the yard. In the distance, she could see a light burning in what must be the bunkhouse. Was Caleb awake too? The strange cowboy puzzled her. His reputation in Willits was fearsome: the hard-eyed rancher who kept to himself, who drove the toughest bargains, who never smiled. Yet he had cried at the sight of her bruises. That single tear had moved her more than any words could have. Morning brought the smells of coffee and bacon. Emma, dressed in the clothes Lucia had provided, a simple blue dress that was slightly too large but clean and whole. Her face in the small mirror looked terrible, the bruises now fully developed in shades of purple and black, but the swelling in her eye had reduced enough that she could see clearly. She emerged from the bedroom tentatively, following the sounds of quiet conversation to the kitchen. Caleb and Lucia fell silent when she appeared. "Good morning," Emma said, suddenly self-conscious. Caleb stood quickly. "How did you sleep?" "Well enough, thank you." The lie came easily after years of practice. "Sit, eat," Lucia encouraged, setting a plate before Emma. "You need strength." The breakfast was simple but delicious: eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits with honey. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten without tension knotting her stomach. Robert had opinions about how much she ate, how quickly, how she held her fork. Every meal had been an opportunity for criticism. "I was thinking," Caleb said carefully, "that you might want to send word to anyone in town who might worry about you. A friend, perhaps." Emma set down her fork. "There's no one," she admitted. "Robert didn't. I wasn't permitted many friendships." The muscle in Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. "I see. What will happen when he comes looking for me?" Emma asked the question that had haunted her all night. Caleb's eyes met hers directly. "He won't find you here. And if by some chance he does, he'll have to go through me first." "And me," Miguel added from the doorway. "And the 3 ranch hands who arrived this morning." Emma looked between them, overwhelmed by their ready defense of a woman they barely knew. "I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me." "No one's getting hurt," Caleb assured her, "but Robert Armstrong needs to understand that you're under our protection now." The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Emma's physical injuries began to heal. the bruises fading from angry purple to yellowish green. More slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to relax into the safety of the ranch. Caleb kept a respectful distance, sleeping in the bunkhouse and giving Emma space to adjust to her new circumstances. But his eyes followed her when she worked alongside Lucia in the garden, and he found reasons to be near the house more often than his duties strictly required. For her part, Emma found herself watching Caleb as well, the way he moved with easy confidence among the cattle, how gently he handled the horses, the rare smile that transformed his stern face when something amused him. He was nothing like Robert, whose charm had masked a cruel nature until it was too late for Emma to escape. A week into her stay, Emma approached Caleb as he split wood behind the house. The rhythmic thud of the axe paused as she neared. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for everything you've done, but I can't stay here indefinitely living off your charity." Caleb frowned. "It's not charity." "What would you call it then?" He considered this, leaning on the axe handle. "Neighborliness." Despite herself, Emma smiled. "We weren't exactly neighbors in Willits. Then call it human decency." His expression grew serious. "You can stay as long as you need, Emma. There's no hurry for you to leave." "I need to support myself," she insisted. "I have skills. I can sew, cook, keep accounts." "I was a teacher before I married." Surprise flickered across his face. "A teacher," Emma nodded. "For 2 years. I taught at a small school outside Sacramento." Something in Caleb's expression softened. "We've been needing a proper school here. There are 7 children within riding distance who get little education beyond what their parents can manage." Hope blossomed in Emma's chest. "Are you saying we could convert the old storage cabin? It needs work, but it's sound." His enthusiasm was growing visibly. "The ranchers around here would contribute to pay a teacher's salary. They've been talking about it for years." "You'd trust me to teach their children?" Caleb's gaze was steady. "I would trust you with far more than that, Emma Armstrong." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Emma felt color rise to her cheeks and looked away first. "I should let you finish your work," she said softly. "Emma," he called as she turned to go. When she looked back, his expression was earnest. "Think about it. You'd be good for this community." That night, Emma made her decision. If she could establish herself as the local teacher, she would have a purpose, an income, and a reason to stay that had nothing to do with hiding from Robert. The thought filled her with determination she hadn't felt in years. The following weeks were filled with activity, as the storage cabin was transformed into a schoolhouse. Caleb worked alongside Miguel and the ranch hands, installing windows for better light, building benches and a teacher's desk, and constructing a proper blackboard. Emma sewed curtains from fabric Lucia provided and created teaching materials from the books in Caleb's library. News spread through the scattered community, and riders appeared at the ranch to meet the new teacher. Emma was nervous at first, worried that someone might recognize her or question her presence, but Caleb introduced her simply as Miss Emma, who's graciously agreed to educate our children. The deliberate omission of her married name wasn't lost on Emma, nor was the protective way Caleb stood beside her during these introductions. The day before the school was to open, with 5 students enrolled and 2 more expected to join within the month, Caleb found Emma sitting alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "May I join you?" he asked. Emma nodded, shifting to make room on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Caleb finally asked. "A little," she admitted. "It's been a long time since I taught." "You'll be wonderful," he said with such certainty that Emma couldn't help but believe him. Another silence fell, but this one was charged with unspoken thoughts. "Caleb," Emma began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about my situation." He turned to look at her, his expression guarded. "What about it?" "I'm still a married woman. In the eyes of the law, I belong to Robert." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You don't belong to anyone. The law doesn't see it that way." Emma twisted her hands in her lap. "If Robert finds me, he has every legal right to take me back." "I won't let that happen," Caleb said, the same promise he'd made that first day in the alley. Emma met his gaze directly. "I want to file for divorce." Caleb's eyebrows rose in surprise. Divorce was uncommon in 1876, particularly in rural communities where the church's influence remained strong. It was difficult to obtain and often left women ostracized. "Are you certain?" he asked carefully. "I can't live in fear forever," Emma said. "I can't build a new life while still legally bound to him." Caleb nodded slowly. "It won't be easy. You'll need a lawyer in Sacramento. There will be questions, testimonies." "I know," Emma said, "but I'm ready to face it. Then I'll take you to Sacramento whenever you're ready." Their eyes met again, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The careful distance Caleb had maintained began to dissolve as he reached out slowly and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "I need you to know that my help comes with no expectations. Whatever you decide for your future, whether it's here or elsewhere, I just want you to be safe and happy." Emma's throat tightened with emotion. After years with a man whose every kindness came with conditions and consequences, Caleb's selflessness was almost too much to bear. "What if my happiness includes you?" she whispered before she could lose her courage. The words hung between them, a question and a confession all at once. Caleb's eyes widened, and for a moment, Emma feared she had misread everything. Then his free hand rose to her face, fingers gently tracing the faded outline of the bruise on her cheek. "I've been afraid to hope for that," he confessed. The first brush of his lips against hers was hesitant, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, Emma leaned into the kiss, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. When they parted, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "We'll go to Sacramento after the school is established," he promised. "We'll make this right." For the first time since she had fled Willits, Emma felt not just safe, but hopeful about the future. The schoolhouse opened the next day with 5 eager students ranging in age from 6 to 13. Emma quickly fell back into the familiar rhythms of teaching, dividing her attention among the different age groups and abilities. The children responded well to her gentle guidance, and by the end of the first week, word had spread about the quality of instruction at the new school. Caleb made a point of riding by each afternoon, ostensibly to check that everything was in order, but Emma knew it was his way of ensuring she was safe. Their relationship was evolving cautiously, with respect for the legal complications of her situation. They were careful to maintain propriety in public, aware that gossip could travel fast in small communities and potentially reach Robert's ears. In private moments, however, they allowed themselves to imagine a future together. Caleb spoke of his dreams for the ranch, how he'd always envisioned children running across its fields and filling the house with laughter. Emma shared her own hopes for expanding the school, perhaps one day building a proper community building that could serve as both school and gathering place. 6 weeks after Emma's arrival at the ranch, as autumn began to paint the surrounding hills in russets and golds, the moment they had been dreading finally came. Emma was walking back from the schoolhouse, her arms full of student work she planned to review that evening, when she saw the rider approaching from the direction of Willits. Even at a distance, she recognized the way Robert sat in the saddle slightly forward, impatient, as if the horse beneath him wasn't moving fast enough. Fear froze her in place. How had he found her? Who had told him where to look? Miguel appeared from the barn, alerted by the approaching rider. His quick glance toward Emma confirmed her fears. He recognized the situation immediately. With a subtle gesture, he directed her toward the house before walking out to meet Robert. Emma hurried inside, her heart pounding. Lucia was in the kitchen and instantly understood from Emma's expression that something was wrong. "He's here," Emma gasped. "Robert has found me." Lucia quickly pushed Emma toward the bedroom. Caleb rode to the north pasture with two of the hands. "Miguel will stall until I can send someone to fetch him." "I can't hide forever," Emma said, surprising herself with her own resolve. "You don't face him alone," Lucia insisted. "Wait for Caleb." Through the window, Emma could see Miguel blocking Robert's path to the house, his stance polite but firm. Robert was gesticulating angrily, his voice carrying across the yard though the words were indistinct. The confrontation seemed to last an eternity. Emma paced the bedroom, alternating between fear and a growing anger. How dare Robert come here? How dare he pursue her after everything he had done? The sound of galloping hooves announced Caleb's return. Emma moved back to the window to see him dismounting in a fluid motion, his expression deadly serious as he approached the two men. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read the tension in Caleb's body, the rigid set of his shoulders as he faced Robert. Whatever was being said, it was clearly heated. Robert jabbed a finger toward the house and Caleb shook his head firmly. Then, to Emma's horror, Robert reached for the gun at his hip. What happened next unfolded so quickly she could barely process it. Caleb moved with lightning speed, drawing and aiming his own weapon before Robert could clear leather. Miguel stepped back, his own hand hovering near his sidearm. Time seemed to stop as the men stood in a frozen tableau, Robert's hand still on his gun, Caleb's Colt aimed steadily at his chest. "Don't," Emma whispered from behind the glass. "Please don't let there be bloodshed because of me." As if hearing her silent plea, Caleb spoke to Robert, his words carrying clearly this time. "This doesn't have to end with a bullet, Armstrong, but it does end today." Robert's hand remained on his gun, his face contorted with rage. "She's my wife. The law's on my side." "The law doesn't give you the right to beat a woman," Caleb responded, his voice ice cold. "Now either draw that gun and take your chances or turn around and ride out. Those are your choices." For a breathless moment, Emma thought Robert would choose violence. His knuckles whitened on the grip of his pistol, his body tensed for action. Then, surprisingly, he relaxed his stance, hand falling away from the weapon. "This isn't over, Kincaid," he spat. "I'll be back with the sheriff." "You do that," Caleb replied evenly. "Bring witnesses too. I'm sure the good people of Willits would be interested to testify about what they've seen over the years." Something in Caleb's words seemed to give Robert pause. His gaze shifted between Caleb and the house, calculation replacing rage. "What's it worth to you?" he finally asked, his tone changing completely. "Having my wife." Emma's stomach turned at the implication. Robert was attempting to negotiate to sell her as if she were property. Caleb's expression darkened. "Get off my land," he said, voice dangerously quiet. "Now." For a moment, Robert hesitated, perhaps assessing whether Caleb's threat was genuine. Whatever he saw in the rancher's eyes convinced him not to push further. With a final venomous glare, he turned his horse and rode away. Emma sagged against the window frame, relief washing through her. She met Caleb's eyes across the yard as he turned toward the house, his expression softening when he saw her watching. That evening, after the ranch had settled into an uneasy quiet, Caleb and Emma sat before the fireplace discussing what had transpired. "He'll be back," Emma said, voicing the fear they both shared. "Not alone," Caleb agreed. "He's too much of a coward for that. He'll try to use the law or bring others. Then we need to act quickly." Emma's voice was stronger than she felt. "We need to go to Sacramento, file the divorce petition as soon as possible," Caleb nodded. "We'll leave tomorrow. Miguel and the hands will watch the ranch. Lucia can mind the school for a few days." "What if it's not enough?" Emma asked the question that had been haunting her. "What if the courts side with him? It happens, Caleb. Wives are expected to obey their husbands." "Not when those husbands are abusive," Caleb countered. "We'll find a good lawyer. We'll gather testimonies from people in Willits who have seen how he treated you. And if that fails—" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Then we'll go somewhere he can't find us. California isn't the only state in the Union." The idea of fleeing, of starting over yet again, should have terrified Emma. Instead, she found herself oddly comforted. As long as Caleb was by her side, she could face whatever came next. "I never thought I'd find the courage to leave him," she admitted softly. "All those years, I told myself it wasn't so bad, that I could endure it, that I had nowhere else to go." "You're the bravest person I know," Caleb said, taking her hand. "Surviving what you did took more courage than most men show in a lifetime." Emma squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his unwavering belief in her. "Tomorrow, then, we face this together." The journey to Sacramento took 2 days by wagon. They traveled with one of Caleb's ranch hands, a taciturn man named Jenkins who rode ahead as scout. The precaution might have seemed excessive, but neither Emma nor Caleb was willing to risk encountering Robert on the road. Sacramento in 1876 was a bustling city, far removed from the quiet isolation of Caleb's ranch. Emma found herself both overwhelmed and exhilarated by the crowds, the noise, the energy of the state capital. They took rooms at a respectable hotel adjoining but separate, maintaining propriety despite their growing feelings for each other. The lawyer Caleb located came recommended by a cattle buyer he'd done business with for years. Howard Simmons was a serious man in his 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened carefully as Emma recounted her marriage to Robert Armstrong, the early years when his temper had been controlled, the gradual escalation of abuse, the isolation from friends and family, and finally, the public beating that had prompted her flight. "It's not an easy case," Simmons admitted when she finished. "The courts generally prefer to preserve marriages. However, California's laws do recognize extreme cruelty as grounds for divorce." "She has the bruises to prove it," Caleb said, his voice tight. "Physical evidence helps," Simmons agreed, "but we'll need witness testimonies as well, people who can corroborate Mrs. Armstrong's account." "I was very isolated," Emma said hesitantly. "Robert was careful about that. But the incident that led to you leaving was public," Simmons noted. "In the alley in Willits, correct. Were there witnesses?" "Several townspeople saw the aftermath," Caleb confirmed, "and I saw him threatening her." Simmons nodded, making notes. "That's a start. We'll need to gather formal statements." He looked up at Emma. "I must warn you, Mrs. Armstrong, this process may become unpleasant. Your husband will likely contest the divorce. He may make accusations against your character." Emma straightened her spine. "I have nothing to hide. And we'll need to address the matter of your relationship with Mr. Kincaid," Simmons continued delicately. "The court will question the propriety of your living arrangement." Color rose in Emma's cheeks. "Mr. Kincaid has been a perfect gentleman. He slept in the bunkhouse since my arrival." "Nevertheless, appearances matter in these cases." Simmons turned to Caleb. I would advise that Mrs. Armstrong find alternative accommodations until the divorce is finalized. The suggestion felt like a physical blow to Emma. The ranch had become her sanctuary, her home. The thought of leaving Caleb even temporarily, was devastating. There must be another way, Caleb protested. Perhaps, Simmons conceded. If we can find a respectable woman to serve as chaperone at the ranch, someone beyond reproach, whose presence would allay any concerns about impropriety. Lucia is there, Emma offered hopefully. As a servant, her presence isn't sufficient in the court's eyes, Simmons explained gently. We need someone whose social standing is equal to or greater than your own. Caleb was quiet for a moment, then said, "What about my aunt? Martha Kincaid lives in San Francisco. She's a widow, highly respected. I could ask her to stay at the ranch for a time." Simmons nodded approvingly. That would be ideal. A family member of mature years would satisfy the court's concerns. The plan was set in motion immediately. Caleb sent a telegram to his aunt explaining the situation in carefully worded terms, while Simmons began preparing the divorce petition. They would remain in Sacramento until Martha confirmed she could come, and then return to the ranch together. That evening, alone in her hotel room, Emma found herself struggling with conflicting emotions. She was taking concrete steps toward freedom, toward a future of her own choosing, yet the path there seemed fraught with new complications. A soft knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. "Emma," Caleb's voice was low. "May I speak with you?" She opened the door to find him looking troubled. "What's wrong?" "I received a reply from Aunt Martha," he said, holding up a telegram. "She's willing to come, but she can't leave San Francisco for at least 2 weeks. Some business with her late husband's estate that can't be postponed." Emma's heart sank. 2 weeks. Simmons says we should file the petition regardless, start the process. Caleb hesitated, but he still thinks you shouldn't return to the ranch without a chaperone. "Where am I supposed to go for 2 weeks?" Emma asked, distress evident in her voice. "I've been thinking about that." Caleb stepped further into the room, careful to leave the connecting door open. "There's a women's boarding house here in Sacramento that Simmons recommended. It's run by a Mrs. Holloway, who's apparently quite formidable. You'd be safe there, and beyond any hint of scandal." The practical solution did nothing to ease the ache in Emma's chest. 2 weeks apart felt like an eternity after the closeness they had developed. "It's the right thing to do," she acknowledged reluctantly. "I don't like it," Caleb admitted, moving closer until he could take her hands in his. "But I won't risk your reputation or the success of your divorce petition, not when we're so close to making things right." Emma looked up at him, at the earnest concern in his eyes, and felt a rush of affection so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. "You're a good man, Caleb Kincaid." "I'm trying to be," he said softly. "For you." Their kiss was both tender and tinged with the sadness of impending separation. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks, he said. Then we go home together, properly chaperoned, and face whatever comes next. The boarding house was exactly as Caleb had described, respectable, austere, and presided over by Mrs. Holloway, a widow in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a penetrating gaze that seemed to catalog every detail about Emma in an instant. "Mr. Simmons explained your situation," Mrs. Holloway said after Caleb had left, having seen Emma settled in a small but clean room on the second floor. "You'll find no judgment here, Mrs. Armstrong. Many of my boarders are women in transition." Emma was grateful for the older woman's matter-of-fact approach. "Thank you for accepting me on such short notice." "Your meals are included in the weekly rate," Mrs. Holloway continued briskly. "Breakfast at 7, dinner at noon, supper at 6. The parlor is available to all boarders until 9 in the evening for reading or needlework. Male visitors may be received there between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, with prior approval. The rules were stricter than Emma had anticipated, but she understood their purpose. This was a place where women's reputations were protected, where they could live without scandal while navigating difficult circumstances. The days passed slowly. Emma filled her time helping Mrs. Holloway with household tasks, reading in the parlor, and writing detailed lesson plans for the school. Caleb visited every afternoon, bringing news of their case and updates from Simmons. The lawyer had filed the divorce petition, and, as expected, Robert had contested it vehemently. He had hired his own legal representation and was gathering statements from acquaintances in Willits who would testify to his good character and Emma's nervous disposition. "Simmons isn't worried," Caleb assured her during one visit. "He's found 3 witnesses who saw Robert dragging you into that alley, and 2 more who have known about the abuse for years but were afraid to speak up. The storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Jenkins, has apparently been concerned about you for some time." Emma was surprised. She had always assumed no one in Willits had noticed or cared about her situation. The knowledge that others had seen her suffering and now were willing to testify on her behalf was both comforting and painful. "What else did Simmons say?" she asked. "The judge assigned to the case is William Thornton. Simmons says he's fair-minded and has ruled in favor of abused wives before." Caleb's expression grew serious. "But there's something else you should know. Robert has been making accusations." Emma tensed. "What kind of accusations?" "He's claiming you left him for me, that we were involved before you fled Willits." The implication was clear, and Emma felt sick at the thought. "That's absurd. I barely knew you before that day in the alley." "Simmons says it's a common tactic. If Robert can paint you as unfaithful, it weakens your claim of being the injured party." Caleb reached for her hand, mindful of Mrs. Holloway watching from across the parlor. "Don't worry. We have the truth on our side and witnesses to back it up." Despite his reassurances, Emma worried. She had seen firsthand how persuasive Robert could be, how easily he charmed strangers while hiding his true nature. What if he convinced the judge? What if her bid for freedom failed? As the first week at the boarding house drew to a close, Emma received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Jenkins, the storekeeper's wife from Willits, had come to Sacramento specifically to see her. "I couldn't stay silent any longer," the older woman said as they sat in the parlor under Mrs. Holloway's watchful eye. "Not after what happened that day. I should have spoken up years ago, Emma. I saw the signs, the way you'd flinch when he raised his voice, how you'd cover your arms even in the hottest weather." Emma was touched by the woman's concern, even as she wondered why Mrs. Jenkins had never reached out before. "You couldn't have known for certain." "I knew enough, Mrs. Jenkins said firmly. "My own sister was married to a man like Robert. She didn't escape in time." The implication hung heavily in the air. "I won't let history repeat itself. I've given my statement to Mr. Simmons, and I'll testify in court if needed." The visit left Emma feeling both bolstered and melancholy. Support was emerging from unexpected quarters, yet it had taken her desperate flight and public scandal to bring it about. Caleb noticed her subdued mood during his visit the next day. "What's troubling you?" he asked gently. Emma struggled to articulate the complex emotions Mrs. Jenkins's visit had stirred. "I keep thinking about all the years I spent in that house with Robert, believing I was completely alone. Now I learn that people knew they suspected, but no one said anything until I took that first step myself." Caleb nodded in understanding. "People are afraid to interfere in what they see as private matters. It's wrong, but it's how things are." "Would you have stepped in that day if I hadn't screamed?" Emma asked suddenly. The question caught Caleb off guard. He was quiet for a long moment before answering truthfully. I don't know. I'd seen Robert around town, heard rumors about his temper, but until I saw him threatening you, saw the fear in your eyes and then the bruises. He swallowed hard. I like to think I would have done something eventually, but the truth is, I might have just kept my distance like everyone else. His honesty, painful as it was, only increased Emma's respect for him. But when the moment came, you didn't hesitate. Some lines can't be uncrossed once you see them clearly, Caleb said. Seeing what he'd done to you, knowing what kind of man would hurt a woman that way, I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd walked away. Emma reached across the small table that separated them, taking his hand despite Mrs. Holloway's disapproving glance. Then that's all that matters. You acted when it counted most. The second week at the boarding house passed more quickly than the first. Emma had settled into the routine and found unexpected fellowship with the other boarders, a young widow saving to open a millinery shop, a middle-aged woman who worked as a clerk in a law office, and a schoolteacher not unlike Emma herself, who had come to Sacramento seeking better opportunities. Their stories, shared in quiet conversations over needlework or during meals, reminded Emma that she was far from alone in facing life's challenges. Many women found themselves navigating difficult circumstances, making hard choices, rebuilding their lives after loss or hardship. Caleb's Aunt Martha arrived in Sacramento on the 14th day, coming directly to the boarding house to meet Emma before they departed for the ranch. She was a striking woman in her 50s, dressed elegantly but practically, with Caleb's same direct gaze and self-assured manner. "So you're the woman who finally cracked my nephew's armor," Martha said after introductions were made, her assessing look softening into approval. "I've been telling him for years he needs someone with spirit." Emma blushed at the frank assessment. "I think it might be more accurate to say he helped me find my own spirit again." Martha nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "Caleb tells me you're establishing a school near the ranch, a worthy endeavor. I was a teacher myself in my younger days before I married Mr. Kincaid's uncle." The easy rapport between Emma and Martha continued as they prepared to leave Sacramento. Caleb watched their interaction with evident relief, having worried that his aunt might be more judgmental of the unusual situation. "She likes you," he murmured to Emma as they loaded her trunk onto the wagon. "That's no small feat. Aunt Martha is notoriously particular about the company she keeps." "I like her too," Emma admitted. "She reminds me of you, straightforward but kind." The return journey to the ranch felt like a homecoming. Despite the relatively short time Emma had spent there before their trip to Sacramento, the rolling hills and pine forests had worked their way into her heart. As they crested the final ridge and the ranch came into view, she felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that she had never experienced in the house she had shared with Robert. Lucia rushed out to greet them, embracing Emma warmly. "The children have been asking every day when their teacher will return," she said. "Young Thomas even brought flowers for your desk yesterday." The news warmed Emma's heart. "I've missed them too. We'll resume classes tomorrow." Martha settled into the guest room, quickly establishing herself as a formidable but fair presence in the household. She took an immediate interest in the school, offering to assist Emma with the older students' mathematics lessons, having a particular talent for the subject. Life at the ranch fell into a new rhythm, Emma teaching during the day, evenings spent in conversation around the dinner table or reading by the fire, all under Martha's watchful but sympathetic eye. The older woman maintained propriety while giving Emma and Caleb space to continue developing their relationship. "You two aren't fooling anyone," Martha remarked dryly one evening after Caleb had lingered overlong saying good night to Emma on the porch. "But I appreciate the effort to maintain appearances. It matters for your case." 2 weeks after their return to the ranch, a rider arrived from Willits with news. The preliminary hearing for Emma's divorce petition had been scheduled. Judge Thornton required both parties to appear in Sacramento in 1 week's time. "I need to go," Emma said that evening as they discussed the development. "I can't hide behind lawyers and statements. I need to face Robert and the judge directly." "We'll all go," Martha declared firmly. "My presence will ensure everything remains proper, and I can testify to your character if needed." Caleb nodded in agreement. "Miguel and Lucia can watch over things here. The school can manage without you for a few days." The night before their departure, Emma found sleep elusive. She slipped from her bed and wrapped herself in a shawl before moving quietly to the porch, careful not to wake Martha in the adjacent room. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the black velvet sky. Emma drew a deep breath of the cool, pine-scented air, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Couldn't sleep either. She turned to find Caleb approaching from the direction of the bunkhouse, his expression concerned in the moonlight. "Too much on my mind," she admitted. He joined her at the porch railing, keeping a respectful distance. "Are you worried about seeing him again?" "Yes," Emma said honestly, "but not because I'm afraid of him anymore. I'm afraid of what he might say, how he might twist things." "The truth will stand," Caleb assured her. "Simmons has prepared everything thoroughly." Emma turned to look at him directly. "There's something I need to ask you, Caleb, something important." The seriousness in her voice made him straighten, giving her his full attention. "Anything. If this goes well, if the divorce is granted, what happens next? Between us, I mean." The question hung in the air, weighted with all the unspoken hopes and fears they had been carrying. Caleb moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I thought I'd made my feelings clear, but maybe I haven't. Emma Armstrong, from the moment I saw you in that alley, no, from the moment I saw your courage despite everything you'd endured, I've been falling in love with you." Emma's breath caught at the declaration. "Even with all the complications I bring, especially because of them," he said softly. "Your strength through adversity, your gentleness with the children, your determination to build a new life, how could I not love you for those things?" Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of fear or pain she had become accustomed to. These were tears of joy, of relief, of a love she had never expected to find. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have almost from the beginning, though I was afraid to admit it even to myself." Caleb's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. "When this is over, when you're legally free, I want to court you properly. No hiding, no scandal, just a man and a woman building a future together. If you'll have me." "I'll have you," Emma promised, leaning into his touch. "Now and always." Their kiss sealed the vow, a promise of the future they would fight for together. The Sacramento courthouse was imposing, its stone facade and columns designed to inspire both respect and intimidation. Emma felt both as she climbed the steps alongside Caleb and Martha, Simmons waiting for them at the entrance. "Mrs. Armstrong," the lawyer greeted her. "Mr. Kincaid, Mrs. Kincaid. Judge Thornton is ready to begin. Mr. Armstrong and his counsel are already inside." Emma's steps faltered momentarily at the news that Robert was waiting. Caleb's hand at her elbow steadied her, his silent support giving her the courage to continue. The courtroom was smaller than she had imagined, with dark wood paneling and high windows that cast mote-filled beams of sunlight across the proceedings. Judge Thornton, a thin man with a serious demeanor and salt and pepper beard, presided from a raised bench. And there was Robert, seated beside his lawyer, looking respectable and aggrieved, the picture of a wronged husband. His eyes met Emma's as she entered, and the familiar cold calculation in them sent a shiver down her spine. The proceedings began formally, with each lawyer presenting the outline of their case. Simmons spoke eloquently about the pattern of abuse Emma had suffered, the public incident that had finally driven her to flee, and the witnesses prepared to testify to Robert's cruelty. Robert's lawyer countered with accusations that Emma had abandoned her marital duties without cause, had engaged in improper relations with Caleb Kincaid, and was mentally unstable, prone to exaggeration and hysteria. Judge Thornton listened impassively to both sides before addressing Emma directly. "Mrs. Armstrong, these are serious allegations on both sides. I'd like to hear from you directly about why you believe this marriage should be dissolved." Emma rose, conscious of Robert's eyes boring into her, of Caleb's supportive presence behind her, of Martha's dignified nod of encouragement. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steadier than she had feared it would be, "I married Robert Armstrong in good faith 6 years ago, believing we would build a life together based on mutual respect and affection. Within months of our marriage, he began to change." She recounted, in calm, clear terms, the progression of Robert's behavior, the initial criticism and control, the isolation from friends and family, the first slap that had shocked and confused her, and the escalating violence that followed. She spoke of her attempts to be a good wife, to avoid triggering his temper, and her growing realization that nothing she did would ever be enough. The incident in Willits that Mr. Simmons described was not unusual in its nature, Emma continued, only in that it happened in public, where others could see what had become my private nightmare. When Mr. Kincaid intervened, he offered me the first genuine protection and safety I had known in years. Judge Thornton's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were attentive. "And what of Mr. Armstrong's accusation that you and Mr. Kincaid were involved prior to your departure from the marital home?" Emma met his gaze directly. "That is absolutely false, Your Honor. I had barely exchanged a dozen words with Mr. Kincaid before that day in the alley. He was a customer at the general store, nothing more." "Yet you went directly to his ranch after leaving your husband." "I had nowhere else to go," Emma explained simply. "No family, no close friends. Robert had made sure of that. Mr. Kincaid offered sanctuary when I desperately needed it, with no expectations beyond keeping me safe." The judge turned to Robert. "Mr. Armstrong, you've heard your wife's testimony. What is your response?" Robert rose, the picture of aggrieved dignity. "Your Honor, I love my wife. She has always been delicate emotionally, prone to misinterpreting situations, to imagining slights where none exist. Yes, we've had disagreements, as all married couples do. Perhaps I've raised my voice at times, but the abuses she describes are fabrications, exaggerations born of a troubled mind." Emma felt a familiar sensation wash over her, the disorienting feeling that perhaps she was wrong, that her perceptions couldn't be trusted. It was a feeling Robert had cultivated in her for years. Then she felt Caleb shift behind her, heard the slight intake of breath that suggested he was restraining himself from responding. The small sound anchored her, reminding her that she wasn't alone in her understanding of the truth. "Mr. Armstrong," Judge Thornton said, "there are witnesses prepared to testify that they saw you physically assaulting your wife in Willits. How do you explain that?" Robert's composure slipped slightly. "A misunderstanding, Your Honor. Emma had become hysterical in public. I was attempting to calm her, to get her home where she could rest. Mr. Kincaid interfered in a private matter he didn't understand." The judge looked skeptical. "Mrs. Jenkins of Willits has provided a written statement indicating she has observed evidence of physical abuse on multiple occasions over several years. Is she misunderstanding as well? Robert's jaw tightened. Mrs. Jenkins has always had an overactive imagination and a tendency to meddle in others' affairs. The back and forth continued, with Judge Thornton calling several witnesses who had traveled from Willits. Mrs. Jenkins testified in person, as did the deputy sheriff who had witnessed the aftermath of the alley incident, and a neighbor who had heard Emma's cries through the thin walls of the Armstrong home on numerous occasions. Martha Kincaid took the stand as well, speaking to Emma's character and conduct during her stay at the ranch, emphasizing the propriety that had been maintained at all times throughout the proceedings. Emma remained composed, though inside she was a storm of emotions. Seeing Robert again, hearing his smooth lies, brought back the fear and doubt she had lived with for so long. But each time those feelings threatened to overwhelm her, she would look at Caleb, at the unwavering belief in his eyes, and find her center again. After a full day of testimony, Judge Thornton called both lawyers to approach the bench. They conferred in low voices for several minutes before returning to their respective tables. "The court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, at which time I will deliver my ruling," the judge announced before striking his gavel. As they filed out of the courtroom, Robert managed to position himself near Emma. "This isn't over," he murmured, too low for others to hear. "You'll always be mine, Emma. Remember that." Before she could respond, Caleb was at her side, his hand protectively at the small of her back. "Step away, Armstrong," he said quietly. "You've said enough." Robert's eyes narrowed, but with the deputy sheriff watching from nearby, he merely smirked and turned away. That night at their hotel, Emma picked at her dinner without appetite. "What if the judge believes him?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since the hearing. "Robert can be very convincing when he wants to be. Judge Thornton struck me as a perceptive man," Martha said confidently, "and the evidence in your favor is substantial." Caleb reached across the table to take Emma's hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. If the divorce isn't granted now, we'll appeal, find more witnesses, whatever it takes." His determination bolstered Emma's faltering courage. "You're right. This is just the beginning, not the end." The next morning dawned clear and bright, belying the tension that filled the courtroom as Judge Thornton took his seat. Emma sat straighter, prepared to hear her fate. "Having considered the testimony and evidence presented," the judge began, "I find the following: that Robert Armstrong has indeed engaged in a pattern of conduct constituting extreme cruelty toward his wife, Emma Armstrong, that such cruelty has been corroborated by multiple reliable witnesses, and that the marriage has been irretrievably broken by these actions." Emma hardly dared to breathe as the judge continued. "Therefore, in accordance with the laws of the state of California, I grant the petition for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty. The marriage between Emma and Robert Armstrong is hereby dissolved." Relief flooded through Emma so powerfully she felt lightheaded. Beside her, Caleb squeezed her hand tightly. "As to the division of property," Judge Thornton continued, "given the circumstances and Mrs. Armstrong's need to establish herself independently, I order that she shall retain her personal effects and be awarded the sum of $500 from the marital assets." It was more than Emma had expected. The amount would allow her to establish herself properly, without depending entirely on the school's modest income. "Further," the judge added, looking directly at Robert, "I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. Armstrong from approaching or contacting Mrs. Armstrong in any way. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and imprisonment." Robert's face had darkened progressively as the ruling was delivered. Now he stood abruptly. "This is an outrage. She's my wife." "Not anymore," Judge Thornton said firmly. "And I caution you, Mr. Armstrong, that any display of the temper so many have testified to will not serve you well in my courtroom." The warning was enough to make Robert subside, though the look he cast toward Emma was venomous. "Court is adjourned," the judge declared, striking his gavel one final time outside the courthouse. Emma stood in the sunshine, feeling as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was free. Legally, officially free. "Congratulations, Mrs. Armstrong," Simmons said, shaking her hand. "Or perhaps I should ask if you'll be resuming your maiden name." Emma hadn't considered the question before. "Yes," she decided in that moment. "Yes, I think I will. Emma Addison again." "A new beginning," Martha approved. "Well earned." The return journey to the ranch was markedly different from their tense trip to Sacramento. Emma felt lighter, almost buoyant with the knowledge that her past no longer had legal claim on her future. "What will you do now?" Martha asked as their wagon rolled through the Golden Hills toward home. "Continue teaching at the school," Emma nodded. "Yes, I love the work and the children, and—" She glanced shyly at Caleb. "I have reason to stay in the area now." "Indeed you do," Martha said with a knowing smile, "though I suppose my services as chaperone will soon be unnecessary." Caleb coughed, looking slightly embarrassed. "Aunt Martha, I think we can manage to conduct ourselves properly without supervision." "Of course you can," his aunt agreed. "But traditions exist for a reason, dear nephew. A proper courtship period is still expected, divorce or no divorce." Emma couldn't help but laugh at Caleb's chagrined expression. The sound of her own laughter surprised her, free and unguarded in a way it hadn't been for years. Life at the ranch settled into a new pattern after their return. With her legal freedom secured and Martha's continued presence ensuring propriety, Emma and Caleb began a formal courtship. He would call at the schoolhouse after lessons ended, taking Emma for drives in the buggy or walks along the creek. On Sundays, they attended church together in the nearest town, enduring the curious glances of those who had heard rumors of Emma's situation, but gradually earning acceptance through their dignified conduct. The school thrived under Emma's care, growing to 8 students by the end of the year. She introduced music and art alongside the traditional subjects, encouraging her pupils to express themselves creatively. Several of the local mothers began to visit during lessons, initially out of curiosity, but soon volunteering to assist with special projects or celebrations. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, on a crisp autumn evening with the surrounding hills ablaze in seasonal colors, Caleb took Emma to a special spot overlooking the valley. A blanket was already spread beneath an oak tree, a picnic dinner arranged beside a bottle of wine. "This is lovely," Emma said, settling onto the blanket. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to spend time with the woman I love?" Caleb asked, though there was a nervous quality to his smile that suggested there was more to the evening than a simple picnic. They ate and talked as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When the meal was finished, Caleb grew quiet, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out over the valley. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, moving to sit closer to him. "The future," he admitted. "Our future if you want one together." Emma's heart quickened. "I do." Caleb turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Emma Addison, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Before you came into it, I thought I knew what I wanted: this land, my cattle, the business I've built. But now I realize those things are empty without someone to share them with." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I'm not as eloquent as I'd like to be." Words don't come easily to me, but I know that I love you, respect you, and want to spend my life with you." Opening the box revealed a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing I have left of hers." Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes, happy tears, so different from those she had known before. "Emma Addison, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children if we're so blessed? Will you build a life with me here, growing old together on this land?" "Yes," Emma said without hesitation, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it, Caleb." As he slid the ring onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly. This man, who had faced countless dangers without flinching, made nervous by the depth of his love for her. Their wedding took place the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills around the ranch. They were married in the schoolhouse Emma had made her own, surrounded by her students, the neighboring families, and friends from near and far. Martha Kincaid returned from San Francisco for the occasion, as did Howard Simmons, who had become a trusted advisor and friend. Lucia had transformed the simple building with flowers and ribbons, while Miguel and the ranch hands had constructed benches for the guests and a proper altar where the teacher's desk usually stood. Emma wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha had helped her select in Sacramento, her hair adorned with spring blossoms. But her greatest ornament was the joy that radiated from her as she walked toward Caleb, who waited for her with undisguised awe in his eyes. The minister, who had traveled from the nearby town, spoke of new beginnings, of faith restored, and of love that grew stronger through adversity. As Emma and Caleb exchanged their vows, their voices rang with certainty and promise. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and the small schoolhouse erupted in cheers as Caleb kissed his bride. The celebration continued at the ranch, with tables set up under the trees and music provided by a fiddler and guitarist from town. As evening fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Emma found a moment to slip away to the porch, taking a quiet breath as she looked out over what was now truly her home. Caleb found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Kincaid?" he teased gently. "Not a single one," she assured him, leaning back against his chest. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in less than 2 years, how different my life is now. Good different, I hope. The best different," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "Thank you for seeing me that day in the alley, really seeing me when everyone else looked away." Caleb's expression grew serious. "I should have seen sooner, we all should have." Emma placed her hand against his cheek. "You saw when it mattered most. You cried for me when I couldn't cry for myself anymore, and then you kept your promise to protect me." "I always will," he vowed, drawing her closer, "for all our days together." As they rejoined their celebration, moving among friends and neighbors who had come to respect and care for them both, Emma felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The path that had brought her here had been painful beyond imagining, yet she couldn't regret it when it had led to this, to love freely given and received, to a home filled with warmth and safety, to a future bright with promise. 5 years later, the Kincaid Ranch had grown considerably. Additional acreage had been purchased, the herd expanded, and the original house enlarged to accommodate a growing family. Emma continued to teach at the school, though now she had an assistant to help with the increased enrollment. On a warm summer evening, Emma sat on the expanded porch of their home, watching Caleb teach their 3-year-old son James to rope a wooden practice steer. The little boy's face was scrunched in concentration, his dark hair so like his father's falling across his forehead as he attempted to twirl the small lasso. Beside Emma, in a rocking chair, Martha Kincaid watched the scene with evident delight. Now in her 60s, she had moved permanently to the ranch after falling ill during a visit 2 years earlier. Her recovery had been slow, and she had eventually accepted Caleb and Emma's invitation to make her home with them. "He has Caleb's determination," Martha observed as young James tried again and again to loop his rope over the wooden steer's horns. "And his patience, thankfully," Emma agreed. "Unlike his sister." As if summoned by the mention, 5-year-old Sarah came racing around the corner of the house, her dress mud-splattered and her braids coming undone. "Mama, Papa, Miguel says the new calf is born. Can I see it? Please?" Caleb scooped up his daughter, mud and all. "Did Miguel say you could see it?" "He said to ask you," Sarah admitted. "But he said it's a special calf with a star on its face like my pony." Emma exchanged an amused glance with Caleb. Their daughter's enthusiasm for all aspects of ranch life was boundless and exhausting. "After supper," Caleb promised. "If you wash up properly and eat all your vegetables." Sarah's momentary disappointment was quickly replaced by acceptance of the bargain. "Yes, Papa. James can come too, right? If he wants to," Caleb agreed, setting her down. Emma watched her family with a heart full to bursting. These moments of ordinary joy were precious beyond measure, her husband's gentle guidance of their children, Sarah's irrepressible spirit, James's quiet determination, Martha's wise presence. Later that night, after the children were asleep and Martha had retired to her room, Emma and Caleb sat together on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder as they enjoyed the peaceful evening. "I had a letter from Simmons today," Caleb said, breaking the comfortable silence. Emma looked up at him. "Oh, what news?" Robert Armstrong died last week in San Francisco. Apparently he'd been drinking heavily for years, got into a fight in a saloon and was stabbed. The news struck Emma with unexpected force. For so long, Robert had loomed as a shadowy threat in the back of her mind, despite the restraining order and the fact that he had never attempted to approach her after the divorce. Now, suddenly, that threat was permanently removed. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted after a long pause. "You don't have to feel anything," Caleb assured her. "Or you can feel everything: relief, anger, grief for what might have been different. It's all allowed." Emma nodded, grateful as always for his understanding. "I think mostly I feel sad for the waste of it all. He had so much potential once." They sat in silence for a while, the swing moving gently back and forth. "Does it change anything for you?" Caleb finally asked. "Knowing he's gone?" Emma considered the question carefully. "It closes a chapter, I suppose, but our story moved on from him long ago." She took Caleb's hand, the same hand that had reached out to her in that alley years before. "You and the children, this home we've built together, that's what matters now." Caleb pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Do you remember what I promised you that first day?" "That I'd be safe," Emma said. "That you'd protect me." "I meant it then, and I mean it now," Caleb said. "Not just from physical harm, but from anything that would diminish your spirit or steal your joy." Emma turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed her life with an act of simple human decency that had blossomed into enduring love. "And I promise to do the same for you, and for our children. To create a home where tears come only from joy, where strength is tempered with kindness, where love is never conditional." As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Emma and Caleb Kincaid held each other close. Surrounded by the life they had built from the ashes of her past life, neither could have imagined on that fateful day in Willits, when a harsh cowboy's tears had fallen at the sight of a brave woman's bruises, and a promise of protection had become the foundation for a future filled with love.